Yeah, you sort of think this wouldn't really pass the pub test in a way. And speaking of pubs, hello from the Yarraka pub up here in Queensland. But I don't think
I apologise. I don't
MPs
have a return
should
monitor
need.
here, so I've got two of our locations wrong tonight. So where are you?
No, well, I'm in Yarraka, and it's south of Longreach, and it's to the east of Windora, and I'm here with Scott Buchholz, who's the Assistant Minister for Roads, and David Littleproud, who's the Ag Minister. We're doing a bit of a road trip. Now, Yarraka has a population of 14, and I think everybody in Yarraka has been in the pub tonight to say g'day to Scotty and David and myself. But it's a serious issue down in... Well, you can just hear them all shouting in the background, so sorry about that. I told them all to be quiet too. Really, no one listens to me. But it's a serious issue, what's happening in New South Wales in terms of, you'd think MPs would have the wherewithal and the brain cells to work out...
Just push through it, or we're going to get a feedback loop here of cheering.
Yeah, are their staff or their friends or people are agents of influence for China? I mean, use your common sense here, ladies and gentlemen, members of the New South Wales Parliament. You don't need someone to tell you who's good or who's bad. You should have your own moral sense.
People saw in Queensland. They saw that there was the border that was closed between New South Wales and Queensland. They saw that there were rules about whether you could do this and couldn't do that, but people were able to gather in their tens of thousands in the middle of Brisbane. That's also the flow-on effect here, which is that if the law doesn't apply, then people start to think, well, hang on. And we're at a moment right now where I think we've got to be incredibly careful here, because the idiots who are sort of protesting about the masks and all the rest, and we'll have a proper talk about that later, they are going to end up giving cover to governments to justify more and more aggressive ways of policing this. Conversely, if people are able to gather freely and protest in a bigger crowd than would be able to go to the football or a restaurant or a funeral or a wedding, where, of course, if you, the rules were put in place just this weekend in Brisbane. I remember, literally, I was at the casino the other night. That won't surprise anyone. At the stroke of midnight, everyone was told they had to sit down because the COVID rules had changed. Now, if that's what's happening to the rest of the population, then surely a protest ruled illegal by a court must be enforced to be illegal.
Totally. And what people are really disappointed with in terms of these protest organisers is, taking along in terms of what Liz said, these people are selfish ingrates. They're putting themselves ahead of the rest of us. Across Australia, people have given up their freedoms, the freedom of labour, the freedom of capital, our own freedoms in terms of speech and protest if we wish, for the common good. But this mob think they're better than us, and the hypocrisy of certain governments in terms of not applying the rules consistently. Here in Queensland, as you said, Paul, we've got pubs who have been fined $6,000, yet 30,000 protesters can have a good old jamboree in King George Square and get away scot-free. It sends the wrong message to people. We are all in this together, except if you think you're more important than us because you're a protest organiser.
James McGrath, I want to ask you about masks quickly before we go on to anything else. What's your message to those that are confronting the Bunnings worker, filming themselves having a go at the cop, the person who's becoming the bush lawyer by the side of the road? My view is they are hurting, not helping. What's yours?
I think they're just being bloody idiots, actually. Like, just if you're going to pick a fight, pick something that's more important than this. Don't pick on the poor Bunnings worker or the cop or whoever it is. Put a mask on. If you don't want to wear a mask, stay at home. Like, seriously, these people just got to wake up to themselves.
A couple of things that are interesting here. There's the obvious, which is the tourism businesses that no doubt are desperately suffering, have been suffering in part because of international travel. But is it not a reminder that if your economy is all about one thing, when the one thing disappears, guess what? You get into trouble, and that regional Australia always needs to be able to diversify apart from tourism.
Totally. And, speaking as someone who's been on the road for the past couple of days around regional Queensland, we can see the impact of tourism when that particular well dries up. And we can also see what happens when the water dries up with the drought. We've got to make sure that in Australia, whether in regional Queensland or in the cities, that our economy is diversified, and whether that's making sure we don't bet everything on China, or whether the good people in Byron Bay don't just focus on tourism. We've got to make sure that other businesses can grow and prosper. The interesting thing about JobSeeker, and I'm really happy that the government has reduced JobSeeker, because in regional Australia there is a demand for people to come and work. And there are jobs out there, and what's happening with JobSeeker is that people are getting an incentive to actually not seek work because they're being subsidised by the government. There are jobs out there, people. Come to regional Australia and you'll find those jobs.
What is your prediction for the week ahead, James McGrath?
I think Palaszczuk is going to come close to closing the borders. If not, she'll close the borders.